Everybody, welcome to Rev'd Up for Sunday. We are two out of the three clergy of St. Mark's Episcopal Church in New Canaan, Connecticut. I'm Peter Walsh.
I'm John Kennedy.
We are sorry that Reverend Elizabeth cannot be with us here today. So today we have the vineyard. Jesus as the vine. We get the calling of Israel meets its fulfillment in Jesus, meets Christian discipleship, meets Christian mystical theology, meets Christian meditators, meets those who want to do good works. All wrapped together. Let's have at it. So the text is John 15, verses 1 to 8. Jesus said to his disciples, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered and thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples." So, John, what do you make of this?
Well, what was that list you had?
Okay, yeah. How about that for a starting list?
I think that's
Thank you for calling me back to that, John.
Yeah.
So I have the calling of Israel meets its fulfillment in Jesus, meets Christian discipleship, meets Christian mystical theology, meets Christian meditators, meets good works.
Okay. I think that's really good, especially because it kind of goes in what I think is a logical order to take these pieces. So the calling of Israel, of course, I think what you have in mind here, what you're getting at, is that the vine or the vineyard is a biblical symbol of Israel. We see it in Psalm 80 when it says God brought a vine out of Egypt and planted it, but then later goes on to talk about the troubles that this staying with the image of Israel as the vine, the trouble that the vine has run into, that God has broken down its wall. That's very Old Testament Hebrew Bible theme of when the people of God, when the people of Israel break the covenant, do not follow the ways that God has given them to follow, God brings some sort of judgment on them in order to bring them back again. It's sort of corrective punishment, but it is a punishment nonetheless. So God has broken down its wall, the vineyard's wall, so that all who pass by pluck off its grapes, the wild beasts have ravaged it, and so on. Similarly, in Isaiah chapter 5, there's actually, this is called a love song concerning God's vineyard, which I really love.
Apparently
it says love song.
Yeah, apparently it's a bright, I want you to go through it, but apparently it would have been a bridal parable, a bridal story told during the Feast of the Booths, but then it turns pretty sour, so to speak.
It does.
Yeah,
right,
yeah. You want to review that.
Quite
but
literally.
That's the love song. Was considered a bridal thing.
Well, that really fits with the language of fertility here. The vineyard being planted on a fertile hill, God planting it and expecting it to yield grapes, presumably good grapes, but it yields wild grapes. So, in other words, not so good.
Yeah, apparently in Hebrew that's called stink fruit. Phenomenal. Stink fruit. Why does the Bible not say things like stink fruit?
Say that.
Stink fruit, yeah.
It'd be up there with he stinketh.
Yeah, he stinketh.
King James
right,
of Jesus raising Lazarus.
Nice call. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so that's going on, and then Jesus is fulfilling this in some way.
Right. Thank you for that. And we cannot understand this passage without having the lens of the Hebrew vine and vineyard imagery. And just to say that Jesus is saying not just that he is the vine, he is the true vine. And in Jeremiah says about the people, they are the true vine. But again, it's the vine that's gone bad and producing bad fruit. And so when Jesus says, I am the true vine, he undoubtedly expects everybody to have that resonance, the Jeremiah resonance, and of course, ego eimi, the I am statement here. Just to stay on the vine thing one more second, just because it's super uber cool. Josephus says, the ancient historian says that at the gate of the temples, at the temple door, there was a gilded vine that was incredible, that it came from the top and came down the side, just to point again the importance of the vineyard, the people of Israel being God's vineyard, and that on the coins, in fact, they had vineyards too. So this vineyard imagery is all over the Hebrew scriptures, as you said. And I think that the important thing here is that, the stunning thing here is that Jesus is saying, I am the true vine. In other words, what used to be the people of Israel is now him.
Right.
Finds its fulfillment in him. The healthy vineyard is him. It's a very, very potent statement.
Yes.
And he's changing the paradigm a little bit on that front too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The idea of the vocation and identity of an entire people,
right,
being concentrated and fulfilled and redefined in and as one person is fairly astonishing.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, part and parcel of why he gets the religious leaders so upset. Of course, he does not say this to the religious leaders. This is during the farewell discourse to his disciples.
Right.
Of course, on the night before he dies. We could go on about where else vine imagery comes up, but I found myself thinking about how is it that vines actually grow, and what does that tell us about the meaning of pruning? Because that comes up pretty early.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go on that. I was thinking when I was preparing this, Bishop Bill Burrell was the bishop in residence, and when I was at All Saints Episcopal Church and Day School in Phoenix, and Bill previously had a parish in California, right in the middle of a bunch of vineyard people. And I was thinking, boy, these people would really have at this and understand the whole metaphorical thing that's happening here at a much deeper level than we are. But let's talk about exactly what you're talking about. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make more fruit. Okay, so we usually think of pruning that which is no good, and now he's saying he's pruning that which is good. And that word for prune is a rough translation in English because it isn't what the Greek word says, which comes from the Hebrew word, which is really to cleanse, kathairo, where we get catharsis from. And the interesting thing is, nowhere in the Hebrew scriptures is this word applied to pruning a vine. This is a Johannine idea here, a Johannine delivery, and that the word cleanse is purification, and it's used for the ritual cultic purification language of what you would do in the temple. So he's purifying the grapes as though they are preparing to meet God, which is what purification is. And I wonder if I might just say one other word about cleansing and how we are to understand that, because our Christian spiritual tradition doesn't have purity codes in the same way, or what they're talking, what certain denominations might talk about purity isn't anything about what's talked about here. So in the Hebraic understanding of the divine, God is pure, and that one of the reasons we don't draw close to the divine in the Hebrew understanding is that we'll ignite, where the God is like fire, the purity that, and we'll just get burned up in our impurities. And so essentially the whole book of Leviticus is about purification, that we might be pure so that we can meet a pure God. And it's like why there's all these cleansing rituals and taking a bath before you come before the Lord and all this sort of stuff. So this is stuff that is immersed in their world and in Jesus' world, but to us is a little clanky. We don't quite get it, I would say.
I would say so. Yeah. All that I find to be very illuminating. I also just want to add something I was thinking of, which was what Jesus says in the Beatitudes about purity, that blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. So there's definitely a connection there.
Nice
and I think when it's in terms of purity of heart, maybe that can resonate a bit more with us, with more contemporary ears. that it's less about actions, although of course actions follow from the disposition and condition of our heart, but it's more about the condition of our heart and whether we are all tangled up, which is very apropos of vine imagery. Everybody knows, I think, what it's like to have a tangled up heart. And that just gets in the way of us, never mind seeing God, just like living the lives we want to live, feeling like ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things here is so the passage doesn't begin immediately with, I am the true vine and my Father is the vine grower, abide in me as I abide in you. They have this whole little piece here about the Father as the vine dresser, as it's said, or farmer, or whatever they call a person who tends vines nowadays. It's got a really cool word. I can't remember what it is or phrase for it. That in here we do get something of a spirituality of pruning and purification, that not all things about us are great and perfect, and part of what we go through in the spiritual journey is this purification. And so we might think of the classic understandings of the spiritual journey as purification, illumination, and union. I mean, Evan Underhill brings that into 5, but that the first stages, early stages, are purification, the aligning of our lives with divine life, and that means that that's a lot of cutting off of stuff and development of disciplines and the undevelopment of other things that we were very good and disciplined at doing. So that this is in our tradition.
Yeah, it is.
But maybe we might not hear that resonance right away in this passage.
Yeah. Absolutely. And back to how it is that vines grow, like they need pruning. Otherwise, they get tangled. They don't reach their potential unaided.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I like that. That.
So instead of what would be sort of the state of nature, again, left alone, instead of a vine that bears a lot of second-rate grapes, or in the language of Isaiah, wild grapes, when taken care of, when pruned lovingly and carefully and skillfully, the vine produces good grapes. It sort of is enabled to be itself, what it was created to be. And this reminds me of a Jewish notion. I think the word is tikkun, which has been talked about on the podcast before, that God made the world in such a way that it isn't all that it could be. It is that potentially, but that potential is actualized through the action of God, and particularly through the action of God as sort of channeled through human beings as God's image bearers and representatives on earth. And I think that's just a beautiful example of that sort of notion, that there are things in nature which actually need our help to become what they could be, maybe should be. Oh,
thanks for bringing that to the table here. There's many Hebraic concepts that I would say most of us as Christians don't know much about, that are so fruitful and so great for us to learn and ponder and to take and make it part of our tradition too. I just, since we're on the pruning here, I mean, I think we get this other crazy Johannine thing. It's just, how are we pruned? We're pruned by the word.
Right.
We're pruned by words, which is really, really interesting. Yeah. That you get into this whole thing where it's what Jesus has to say, and the way he says it, the compelling nature is the thing that changes us. And that where he says, he shifts from pruning to that verse, you have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Or he might have said, you have already been pruned by the words that I've spoken to you. Or it might have been translated as such. And so with that cleansing, that pruning, we get the reverberations of John chapter 13, which we've already covered on Maundy Thursday, which is the cleansing of the feet, and Peter saying, you can't cleanse my feet, Lord. And then Jesus saying, well, if I don't cleanse your feet, you have nothing to do with me. And he says, cleanse my whole body. And again, Jesus says, you're all clean except for one, of course, being Judas here. And now we get that reverberation again. We're just a few chapters later from that, and he's back talking about this cleansing. But it's the word that is so powerful. And in John's gospel, the power of the word. I mean, it's, back to the story, the phenomenal story of the Samaritan woman who later down the story, it says others believe because of her word. I mean, the word is powerful. And if I just can chuck into you one other thing here, when I was on sabbatical and I had the great honor and soul delight to get 2 hours of the most reverend Dr. Everything, Rowan Williams, and I was asking him about my life, and he shared about his life, and we were talking about Jesus as the second person of the Trinity, and Rowan said something like that he continues in the faith because he continues to be addressed by the Word. Phenomenal statement.
Truly.
Addressed by the word.
Yeah.
And I think that's something of what's getting at here. We are addressed by the word. It's not just like these are teachings like you go to elementary school and they tell you to be nice. That's not what's happening here. This is the divine word, the word that has God in it. I am the true vine. The word that has divinity in it is addressing us. And that is the agent that just boom, that's what does the pruning. It's a God word. It's God's action in our lives.
Wow.
I think that's something of what's happening with that statement.
I do too. I find it so, for me, astonishing that the most mystical gospel places the most emphasis on the word. And I preached about this earlier in the year when the text was John's prologue, chapter 1, that in my particular path, silence and the limitations of words have been very salient. And over time, growing to appreciate the power of the right words, of a good word, of the word. Yeah. And that so much of what I know about silence came to me through words anyway.
Yeah. That was a great serm, by the way. That was a phenomenal sermon, John.
I was reaching for that.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say, those of you who don't know John's preaching, I go on our website and track down some of John's sermons. John's got a lot to say, and that one in particular was really great. So let's talk about the next thing here. Abide in me as I abide in you. Meno, the Greek word, abide, remain, stay, tarry, dwell, to turn aside from a journey, to remain in place, or to seek shelter. This is a big word in John's gospel. I mean, the Greek word is used 112 times in the New Testament, 66 times in the Johannine writings, and 40 times here in the gospel. And this whole question of indwelling and our abiding in the indwelling. I looked this morning at Eugene Peterson's The Word. I wanted to see what he brought to it. Eugene Peterson, just an extraordinary gift to all of us, and an incredible human being. He translates this as, live in me, make your home in me, just as I do in you. And one of the things that we might miss in this passage, because it's not a big word, is the phrase in me is used 6 times. And that the phrase in you or them 3 times. So this abiding, this making a home, this resting in Christ, which is not a work, this is the mystical nugget right here.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it is, of course, more than anything else, it's an experience to be, I kind of started that sentence wrong. I was going to say, an experience to be experienced, but it is a reality to be experienced firsthand, directly. Going back to John being the mystical disciple, this being the farewell discourse, Jesus is leaving his disciples with words that he obviously attaches particular significance and weight to, and this mystical union with the vine as available and real after the crucifixion and resurrection and ascension is clearly at the heart of what Jesus wants his disciples to understand. It is clearly at the heart of the life of the Johannine community. And there is such a difference between thinking about this as an idea as a principle that, like, yes, I think that's right. That's theologically correct.
I got that. Yeah, I'm with that one.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm showing up to church and, holding the right doctrines and saying my prayers or whatever. And all that's is, I think, actually quite necessary for this life. Don't get me wrong. But we can actually be at a remove from the experience without even knowing it. But the experience is the thing that makes all the other stuff, it animates all the other stuff. It makes it worthwhile. It makes it credible. And I just want to kind of put in a plug for the experience. I'm not saying that we need to have a spectacular sort of pyrotechnic mystical experience. That's not at all what I'm talking about. But when we, and speaking for myself, and I know this is true for so many others, because part of why I know this is true is because I've listened to others who have gone deep in the path of prayer, that when we put in the time and sort of drop down beneath the surface level of noise and frenetic energy in our brains and in our bodies, our sort of default mode, and descend to a deeper level of our being, there's just no denying that there is this presence there that holds us, that envelops us, that loves us, that is, the ground of our being. And so many times I think, I just don't have time today, and then when I still sit down and show up anyway, of course the rest of my day is kind of transfigured. Better. It's better. It's like, better. I'm an idiot for ever not doing this.
It's just better.
Or ever rushing through it or whatever.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Completely true. I think that this abide in me and I in you, this connectivity, this is the meditator's way. You're talking about, I'll just name it maybe a different way. What Christian meditation is abiding in the presence of Christ, the divine presence, and settling into it as you've described it. And the meditator, the Christian meditation, no matter how you conceive of that, Maranatha or otherwise, mantra meditation, stillness meditation, breath meditation, is to descend into the abode, and you abide in the abode, and the divine abode in the seat of the soul is where in my experience is where Christ sits across from you and meets you eye to eye, and the transformative element. The reason this is such a powerful piece of scripture in Christian mysticism is because the transformative element of the promise of the gospel comes from what you're talking about, experience, the divine touch. We're not transformed by being good. The gospel is like a little to do about being good. It has about being touched by the divine, by the true vine, the vine of the divine. And then that's what rewires the life of the soul here. And that's what brings the fruit. Right? This isn't like you have, because he gets into fruits. It's not like the last sentence about, prove to be my disciples, or however it gets translated. It's not like you have to do good and then therefore prove that you're a disciple. It's just because you're connected, you will bear fruit. That's the way it rolls. It's not possible to bear fruit apart from the vine. But when you're attached to the vine, it's also not possible not to bear fruit. That these things this is where we get mysticism meets discipleship.
Yes. And here I'm thinking about one of Richard Rohr's helpful short little aphorisms that the message of the Bible is mystical more than it is moral. That the morality flows from a mystical insight and experience and grounding. And of course, when we are abiding in this love and abiding in Jesus, of course our actions are transformed. Of course we are motivated to live in a different way and treat others with the same love that we have received. So absolutely. I think that is what makes the difference between the sort of the morality or the righteousness of the Pharisees, right? Which is sort of typified in the parable of the prodigal son, as it's known, with the older brother who does everything right, but his doing everything right actually makes him very egocentric and brittle and ultimately resentful when the grace of God is extended to somebody else who isn't as good. But if we are abiding in the vine here, we rejoice when the grace of God is extended to anybody, regardless of how good they are. That calculus just becomes meaningless.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the interesting,
it's liberating.
Yeah. The interesting thing here about the Johannine understanding of discipleship, we don't have the Pauline body of Christ idea. What in John we have is the vine and the vineyard. That's the mutual indwelling here. And that it doesn't actually call you to do anything. It just calls you to rest in the divine, to rest in the vine, right? That's what it is. Abide, stay right here. Don't go anywhere.
Right.
You're because if you're here, you're good. Because that Jesus, all the I am statements, this being the last of them, is saying that I am life, and if you just rest in it, you get life. And because you get life, you get transformed.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, we're going to wrap this up. Next week, we get Reverend Elizabeth back to bring some heat to the conversation here. John, this has been great to be with you. We love it when you like and you subscribe and you tell your friends and when you share with your insights. We're all trying to find our way. We're all midrashing the gospel, and we love it when you share your midrash with us. So we're grateful to you for watching. We're grateful to have Rob behind the camera making sure that this thing happens, and we look forward to talking with you again. So peace be with you.